The award-winning African-American playwright, novelist, and poet Ishmael Reed has a new play with an anti-speciesist theme, and where the animals have a voice. Next on the PETA Podcast with Emil Guillermo. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, it's not every day there's a new play by an award-winning writer where the key characters are animals who talk, finally. Then again, there's few writers like Ishmael Reed, a playwright, novelist, poet, and satirist, who is also the founder of the Before Columbus Foundation, an organization that focuses on the forgotten voices in America, notably blacks, indigenous, and people of color, but also poor working-class whites, and now in this play, those usually discriminated against because of species. In his new play, The Shine Challenge 2024, Reed gives voice to animals who play a surreal role as trial witnesses. Shine is the name of a mythic character in the black oral tradition known as Toast. Shine is said to have been a survivor of the Titanic in 1912, a stoker who was able to swim to freedom. Reed recalls hearing a version of the Toast as a young boy in the 1930s. Langston Hughes heard a version of the Shine Toast in 1956 in Harlem, then put a short version on paper. Now Reed is embellishing his own version, a comic courtroom drama featuring Shine defending himself against accusation that he, a black man, is responsible for sinking the Titanic. The play is a skewering of race, class, and Edwardian values, and because the key witnesses are animals, it's also anti-speciesist. It's a comment on how blacks and animals were treated through history as subhuman, until a creative visionary gives them all a voice. Full disclosure, I have a small role in the Shine Challenge 2024, which has a virtual reading on the Nuyorican Poets Cafe website at www.nuyorican.org. You can get your tickets there. Here's my conversation with novelist, poet, playwright Ishmael Reed on the PETA Podcast. Now I'm pleased to have Ishmael Reed join me as my guest. Hi, Ishmael.
How you doing?
I'm really glad that you could do this. You know, the PETA Podcast talks about animal rights. You talk about all sorts of things in your work, but I was surprised when you feature in this play a shark and a polar bear. And I know it's kind of a part of the satirical setup here of the Shine Challenge. And so I thought you'd be perfect to talk about your writing about the shark and the polar bear as pivotal characters in this play, The Shine Challenge 2024. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The Shine Challenge. Describe the Shine Challenge to people who don't know about black oral traditions. What is the Shine Challenge in your own words?
Well, I think, Emil, we get two storytelling traditions in our education. One is on campus and one is off campus. And so on campus, we are required to submit to the occupations of storytelling traditions. In this sense, the Anglo occupation begins in the 1600s or earlier than that. If you figure Jamestown. So this is just a sort of like a wink in the history of thousands of years of storytelling in North America.
It's the oral tradition. The Shine Challenge deals with the sinking of the Titanic, and according to African American lore, persons of color, even servants, were barred from the Titanic on this ill-fated voyage. But there were these folk, I guess they're called versifiers, who insisted that there was one black on board. And this was something that was told among, in the black community, and it was heard by Langston Hughes on 8th Avenue in 1956, and then he used it as to start creating would you call it a myth? What would you call this?
Well, they found a recording of a storyteller who talked about the Titanic and Shine in the 1940s. Now, when I was a child in Tennessee, maybe I was 3 years old, my uncle had a photo, not a photo, but a picture, a painting of the Titanic. That was the only painting he had in the house. And that's when I maybe suspected that there was a connection between the black culture and the Titanic. And later, when I was growing up, I heard the Shine story in the projects. So this was part of the oral tradition until it was written down. Now, all of us have these, I'm sure Filipino Americans and Asian, Native Americans, all of us have a storytelling tradition that's off campus, away from the official story, Shakespeare, Bacon, 19th century English, away from the official storytelling that we get in school.
Right.
And this is just an example of one of them. And I think as Black people become assimilated, these storytelling traditions are forgotten. Now, Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes, Sterling Brown, and their descendant, people like Quincy Troupe and Amiri Baraka and Larry Neal of the Black Arts Movement, they try to maintain these storytelling traditions because they're always under attack, which is happening right now. Now, I don't know if you read this recently or maybe in the last 3 days. Parents have to approve of African American literature in Florida before it's taught. So the Anglo occupation is clearly in a state of panic in the face of diversity. So I think what happened, what drew my attention, one of the reasons I was drawn to this, reviving the Shine story, is that I talked to 3 generations of Black people, and they never heard of it, including a member of the younger generation, a really hotshot filmmaker, Hollywood filmmaker who came to my house. I asked him, had he heard of it? He hadn't heard of it. So I said, we have to be careful to preserve these stories because it's not unprecedented that storytelling traditions get steamroller over or suppressed. This is what happened to Native American cultures over the last 200 years. Some of their languages are disappearing. Storytelling traditions. Matter of fact, Carla Blank and I edited from Totems of Hip Hop because I visited Alaska, and I was taught to interpret the totem poles as books, pictographs. They tell stories. They're vertical, like some Chinese characters. So, I thought that they were merely pictures, but they tell a story. And the Mayans had writing. So writing in this hemisphere didn't begin with the Europeans. And so some of their stories and some of their storytelling tissues. So we did an anthology called Totems of Hip Hop, where we printed a translation of a story about a giant rat looking for a bride, probably thousands of years old. And the last person who spoke that language died. So this could happen to all of us, because especially now where there's panic in the light of diversity.
Right.
And, they're insisting that their stories be the official stories. So anyway, I wanted to do this. There's also another version of this. Actually, it's the familiar version that was done by the Worcester Group. New York Times wrote a big piece about it. These stories are called toasts. Nobody knows why they're called that. George Clinton, I'm collaborating with him on a project right now. He had his own version of Shine, Swam On, and that was the straight version, one of the many versions. What I've done is I've taken about 35 lines of a version that Langston Hughes heard in 1956. And I've drawn out some of the issues like Edwardian values, metallurgy, class, race, all the different issues. I expand upon them. And so I take those 35 lines and I expand them into a 99-page script.
And it's a full play. It's a courtroom comic drama that's surreal. You mentioned racism and classism and Edwardian values, but one thing you do also insert is a definite sense of anti-speciesism, which I don't know if it was intentional or not, but this is the PETA podcast, and we're talking about animal rights. But when I read the script, I said, I have never seen speciesism taken on so directly as in this play, where you cast or you write about a shark who is a key witness and a polar bear. How do you fit all this into, as you put, the issues of racism and sexism and Edwardian values?
Well, first of all, in African American folklore, animals have speaking parts. Song of the South, for example, what the Disney project,
right,
that was derived from Joel Chandler Harris's listening to Black informants on a plantation. He was another one of these ethnologists. You see, we have to protect our material from ethnologists who claim them.
Right.
Just like these guys from England went to Nigeria and took all the loot and took it to England, British Museum, and the Nigerians say, well, we want the stuff back. And the British Museum, they're saying, well, we'll lend them to you. Well, while the French said, we'll give them back. Joel Chandler Harris wrote these stories down. And I study Yoruba, and I think that these are probably West African informants who were working on this plantation. So he wrote them down. And in these stories, animals have speaking parts. And these stories are meant to, and they're African because they're didactic. They give they're proverbs. The Africans, I studied the Africans, according to my teacher, use proverbs or, to teach their children. And so you'll get morals, of Tar Baby and Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit and all these different animals, a discussion. The other reason I have these animals as thinking beings, first of all, Native Americans refer to all of nature's people as mountain people. They feel that, they are equal to humans. I did research for this short story or novella that Audible published. I found that Descartes was one of those who gave a justification for animal cruelty against animals, because I think for therefore I am. Only humans could think, and animals are inanimate objects or like machines, and you can do with them what you will. And the people who use animals in experiments and torture animals, some of these scientists get their justification from Descartes. So I was studying Descartes, who has been accused of paving the way for cruelty to animals because they're not considered sentient beings.
Right, but you take the opposite side. You take the side of the animals.
Yeah,
and I've never seen it. I've read a lot of your work, much of your work. I've never really seen that side. So when I hear a prosecutor say, "I have no questions, Your Honor. I'd look like a fool subjecting animals to interrogation. They are just things without consciousness. There is no difference between them and any inanimate object."
Well, that's Descartes.
Yeah, and then you have your character, Polar Bear Sam, who's a polar bear, say, "What makes you think you humans are so special? I've seen dying seals in better shape than you humans." I mean, when I read that, I said, "Oh my God, Ishmael has written an animal rights play."
I was influenced by some of the research I did on the philosophical attitude toward the Cartesian attitude toward animals, and I think those research that shows that animals are sentient beings.
Of course, yes. Well, I mean, you say Polar Bear Sam, he's sort of like the biggest mouthpiece. When you were writing it, were you thinking like the animals? Were you thinking about the animals? And where was your empathy level there?
Well, I think, I wrote a novel which came into criticism because I had animals with speaking parts. The Terrible Threes ends with animals engaged in conversation with humans. This mythical, there's always been a rumor that there's a land beneath Haiti. And I have all these animals and humans, characters in the novel, engaged in conversation. And then after the novel was published, they did find a continent beneath. I don't know whether you noticed. They found a continent beneath Haiti. So there was ridicule about that. That I was giving animals speaking parts. But this is world folklore. I mean, problem with the Anglo criticism, which is on decline and under challenge, is that they're not aware of world folklore. Stories that have been told around the world for generations, thousands of years. Then I got into trouble for, like in my new novel, I had the Satan humbled by Hopalong, who was a Native American figure that disappeared. Of course, I had to revive that too. Not only did I revive Shine, but in this the series of novels, I revived a figure that a mythological figure that was present when the Puritans arrived in New England. And I read where not many stories are written by this character anymore. He's a ecology figure.
Yeah.
He advised the Indians not to accept English ways, and that he was really concerned about the state of the land. And so a good Indian imprisoned him in a sleeping mountain. There's still a sleeping mountain in New England. And what I've done is I've freed, and that he would return when the land got so toxic. He would return, so I bring him back. This is a figure that's not been referred to in maybe 100, maybe many decades.
Yeah,
because they're becoming assimilated too, I believe.
But the point that I come away with is that the animals are the moral figures. The animals are the witnesses that free Shine, who is on trial. I mean, it's their testimony. They're the witnesses.
I think there's a consensus that the planet would be better off without this species, without human species. And all you have to do is read the newspaper.
That's the whole thing about speciesism, which is rampant. It means prejudice or discrimination based on species. Yeah. And I have never seen, like I said, until I read your script, I'd never seen it so clear that here is an anti-speciesist play, an anti-speciesist work of art, where the animals are called on to be the witnesses to save a man who is accused of sinking the Titanic. This guy Shine.
Well, they had, ringside seats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of, some people would describe your play as kind of cartoonish or a surreal satire. You have a shark who had the ringside seat. He knows how Shine survived the Atlantic. And then you also have a polar bear who is called on to.
Well, he indicts the captain.
Yeah.
Crew, because you play Ishmael.
Yeah.
One of the builders.
Oh yeah. I am in the play. I must say, full disclosure, I am in the play. Sure. A small room.
And see, one of the stories was that they were trying to compete with the Cunard line and getting to New York and breaking records. And so they were going so fast they couldn't turn around.
Right.
That's one of the theories about why the Titanic sank. So the polar bear is able to witness all of this and testify to the fact that the captain was drunk. See, some of the stuff is factual, some is like made up. So one of the survivors of the Titanic said that the captain was drunk.
But here's the thing: the animals saved the day, because they know the truth. Even in this fictive, mythic, surreal play that you've written, the animals are the moral saviors, and the in terms of speciesism, their voices should be heard. You give them a voice. That's, I think, one of the things that I got from reading the play. It's comic, but it's also real.
This sounds silly, but I've been communicating with the birds around here because I have a very good ear and I'm able to imitate their sounds.
Yeah.
And, in the afternoon, if the weather's warm, I come back and sit on the porch and start their sounds, and they all assemble on the telegraph wire out there. And I think the mourning dove is trying to date me or something because morning dove comes out and gives a mating call.
Coo,
But
coo. I know that sound. I know that sound.
I was out of town for about 2 or 3 weeks for the play, conductor.
Yeah.
And when I came back, they're all lined up. And there's I do a great scrub jay imitation. And when I do the scrub jay imitation, they come to the porch.
Right.
They come right. So I think that I told I told people in the family that if I knew I could communicate with crows, I would stop talking to humans.
Well,
'cause they're more interesting than some of the people I've met.
So when you put together this play, you took the image or the character of Shine, he's a figure in these toasts or these oral traditions that have been passed on. The Titanic went down in 1912. And 1912, if you look at Black history, it's a strange time. Segregation is getting more institutionalized in various cities. 1910, blacks were just 10% of the United States. The United States was 93.4 million. Blacks were about 9.8 million. After the Civil War, after Reconstruction, you saw segregation come back where even the federal government, Woodrow Wilson was segregating federal offices in 1913. So
I mentioned Woodrow Wilson, and actually I'm right.
I was surprised. 1913, the segregation of federal offices was institutionalized by Woodrow Wilson, but also 1913 with the 50th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. So you see how not very far we went in 50 years. What was the need of the African American community to come up with this Shine tale, which is about a black man who they swore was on the Titanic because of he was there. He was with the Stokers, and then he was able to escape and was one of the survivors. Why was it important that this story be kept alive by the African American community back then?
Well, I think that the Titanic was a symbol of white supremacy. That it was thought to be unsinkable, invincible, and many of the people, you had the aristocracy, 2%, who occupying first class. Now in third class there were immigrants, and it was a sort of like the more money you had, the more expensive you were, and the more things you owned, you got first class, and the immigrants in third class were Irish and other immigrants from other nations, and they did most of the drowning. I mean, because as a matter of fact, in my research, I was directed to a book called The Famine Ship, where maybe 50% of the Irish immigrants survived. And they got all kind of diseases and were dropping dead left and right. And that's why I say that I have one of the characters, the captain, saying, well, they're better off than one of these famine ships where, at least they died to serve their betters, because, and I talk about his challenge on whether this is Darwinism. He said, no, this is the English structure that's lasted a thousand years. Everybody knows their place. So I think, and also the fact that Jack Johnson, Leadbelly, and some other people made that up. Jack Johnson was not a passenger and was not denied passage. That's Smith. And we have the Smithsonian version of Leadbelly singing that song during the credits.
Yeah.
At the end. But anyway, Jack Johnson had proven that that white men were not invincible in the boxing ring. So those things sort of line up. It's part fiction and part, factual.
And then this is the oral tradition, of course. And what made me think about this for this podcast, our PETA podcast, is the animals are the heroes. They save the day. They save shine.
They're the witnesses, and they're the ones who give an accurate testimony. Some of the other people who are interrogated on the witness stand are lying. So the animals tell the truth.
Ishmael Reed's The Shine Challenge 2024, a new play with an anti-speciesist theme. As a virtual reading on the Nuyorican Poets Cafe website at www.nuyorican.org, and you can get your tickets there. Once again, I have a small role, overshadowed by the voices of Jack the Shark and Polar Bear Sam, witnesses in the defense of S. Shine, the mythical survivor of the Titanic. Our thanks to Playwright Ishmael Reed. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of the show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. You can contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. Oh, I should have said X, formerly known as Twitter, at Emil Amok, EMILAMOK. See my vlog at amok.com or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Or get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.